I woke up after 8 hours of heart surgery to 89 missed calls. My daughter's voicemail said, "Congratulations on surviving Dad. I sold Brookfield Farm while you were on the operating table. Won $2 million. The notary was very accommodating. I couldn't even hold a pen. Couldn't breathe without a ventilator. But someone had signed my name. Someone had stolen 30 years of my life. The groundbreaking ceremony is in 3 weeks. I can barely stand, but I made one call. Everything will change. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps me understand this community better. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you deeply cared for? Please note this story includes fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. Any similarities to specific names or locations are coincidental, but the lessons about family and boundaries might resonate with your own experiences. I was 60 years old, and I had built a lot of things in my life. Bridges, roads, a family. I thought I knew how to build things that lasted. I was wrong. The first thing I heard was the beeping. Steady, mechanical. It tracked my heartbeat. The second thing I felt was pain, a deep ache radiating from my chest, like cracks in concrete. I tried to move, but my body felt like it had been poured into the mattress and left to set. Slowly, I forced my eyes open. The room was bright with harsh fluorescent light. White ceiling tiles, pale green walls, a thin curtain hanging halfway across the room. Machines hissed and clicked around me. I blinked, trying to make sense of where I was and why everything hurt. Then I remembered. The surgery, triple bypass, 8 hours on the table. Dr. Harlow had been calm, reassuring, but I had seen the concern in his eyes when he explained the blockages. Severe, he had said. Life-threatening. I had signed the consent forms with a steady hand, because that was what you did when you were 60 years old and had spent 40 years building infrastructure. You assessed the risk. You moved forward. I turned my head slowly and saw her. Florence. My younger sister sitting beside my bed with her arms folded tightly. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she had not slept in days. When she saw me looking at her, she straightened up. Relief flickered across her face, then was replaced almost immediately by something heavier. Worry? Or maybe guilt. "Lawrence," she said quietly, her voice cracking. "You're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and raw like I had swallowed gravel. Florence held a straw to my lips. The water was cold and tasted faintly metallic, but it helped. How long had I managed? 3 days, she said. You came out of surgery on the 3rd. They kept you sedated while you healed. You've been in and out since yesterday, but this is the first time you've really been here. 3 days. 3 days of my life gone. A nurse came in, checked the monitors, asked me questions. Could I wiggle my toes? Did I know where I was? What year was it? I answered correctly. She told me, "Doctor." Harlow would visit later, reminded me not to get up on my own, and left. Florence waited until the door clicked shut. "Your phone?" She said, her voice tight. "It's been ringing nonstop." She pulled it from her purse, holding it like something dangerous. The screen lit up when she set it beside me. 89 missed calls. I stared at the number. 89. I had never had 89 missed calls in my entire life. Not when Florence's husband had been in a car accident. Not when my mother had passed. 89 calls meant something catastrophic. "What happened?" I asked. Florence's jaw tightened. "You need to listen to something," she said. "I didn't want to do this now. I wanted to wait until you were stronger. But you need to hear it." She unlocked the phone and opened the voicemail app. Dozens of messages. She scrolled past most of them and stopped on one near the top. Her finger hovered over it for a moment. I nodded. She pressed play. The voice was familiar, warm, cheerful. It was Margot. Hi, Dad. I hope the surgery went well. I'm sure you're still sleeping it off right now. A pause. A breath. Listen. I was going to tell you this in person, but things moved really quickly. Congratulations on surviving the surgery. But your legacy didn't. I signed for you. From now on, you can rest easy because that farm, there's not a single acre left in the name of Lawrence Caldwell. The buyer was very gracious. Cash deal. Everything's been transferred. Don't worry, I'm putting the money to good use. You'll see. Try not to stress too much about it. Doctor's orders. We'll talk when you're feeling better. Love you. The message ended. The phone went silent. I did not move. I could not. The beeping of the heart monitor seemed louder, now faster. My hands were still on the blanket, but I could not feel them. Everything had gone numb. Florence took the phone. I had not realized I had let go of it. I stared at the ceiling. The tiles were water-stained in one corner, a faint yellow bloom someone had tried to paint over, but had not quite covered. I focused on that stain because it was easier than thinking about what I had just heard. She had sold Brookfield, my farm, the land I had bought 30 years ago with my first real paycheck. 340 acres of rolling fields and old oak trees, and a red barn that I had repaired with my own hands the summer Margot turned 6. The place where I had taught her to ride a bike, where we had buried her mother's ashes under the willow tree by the pond. She had sold it. While I was on an operating table, while I was fighting for my life, while surgeons were cutting open my chest and stitching my heart back together. And she sounded pleased about it. I turned toward Florence. She was watching me, her face pale, her eyes glistening. She did this, I said. My voice sounded flat. She sold it, while I was in surgery. Florence nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. I looked back at the ceiling. The beeping continued. The machines kept working. My heart kept beating, even though it felt like it should not. She had sold Brookfield. In the 3 days I had been lying here unconscious and helpless, my daughter had taken everything I had built and signed it away. And somewhere, probably in her brand new office, overlooking some expensive view, Margot Caldwell was moving forward with her plans, and she had used my land to do it. I thought that voicemail was the worst of it. I was wrong about that too. Florence left the room after I heard Margot's message. She said she needed coffee, but I knew better. She needed to step away before she said something she would regret. That was fine. I needed time to think. The room felt smaller now. The walls seemed closer. I could still hear the machines, still feel the dull ache in my chest, where they had cracked me open and stitched me back together. But none of that mattered as much anymore. Physical pain was manageable. This was different. I picked up the phone again. There were still dozens of unread messages, voicemails I had not listened to yet. Part of me wanted to put the phone down and pretend none of this was happening. But I had spent 60 years solving problems, and you could not solve a problem if you did not understand it first. The second voicemail was from my bank. A woman's voice, polite but firm. Unusual activity on my accounts. Large transfers. A flagged transaction. She asked me to call back as soon as possible. The message had been left 2 days ago. The third was from a man named Charles Montgomery. He introduced himself as the new owner of Brookfield Farm and thanked me for such a smooth transaction. He said he looked forward to continuing the legacy of the property. His voice was warm, genuine. He had no idea what he had walked into. The fourth message was from the county recorder's office. A clerk informing me that the deed transfer for 340 acres on Hilltop Road had been officially recorded on April 4th. April 4th. The day after my surgery. The day I had still been sedated, still hooked up to a ventilator, still barely alive. The timeline was becoming clear now. Margot had not waited. She had not hesitated. The moment I went under, she had moved. Papers signed. Money transferred. Deed recorded. All of it done while I lay unconscious in a recovery room. Florence came back in with coffee. She handed one to me. I took it. "There's more," I said. She sat down heavily. I figured. I showed her the phone. She scrolled through the notifications, her expression hardening. When she got to the text messages, she stopped. There were several from Margot. "Dad, please don't be upset. This is for the best. You'll understand." Each one felt hollow, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. But it was the messages from Connor that made my chest tighten. My grandson, 16 years old. 3 texts, all sent late last night. "Grandpa, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Please call me, please. I should have stopped her." I read them twice. Florence was watching me, her jaw tight. "He's a kid," she said quietly. "He didn't have a choice." I know, but knowing that did not make it easier. Connor had been there. He had seen whatever Margot had done, and he was carrying it now. Florence took the phone from my hand. "We need a lawyer," she said. "Right now." I nodded. The deed had been transferred. The money was gone. Charles Montgomery owned my land. Florence pulled out her phone and dialed. "Gerald, it's Florence Garrett. I'm with my brother. We need you, now." She explained the situation in short, clipped sentences. Sold the farm, forged signature, power of attorney. When she paused to listen, her expression darkened. "Yes," she said. "I understand. We won't sign anything. We won't talk to her." She hung up and looked at me. "He's coming tonight. He said not to communicate with Margot until he gets here. And Lawrence." She hesitated. "He said this is criminal. Elder abuse. Fraud. This isn't just a family issue. This is serious." I nodded slowly. I had already known that. But hearing it out loud made it real. My daughter had committed a crime. Against me. While I was fighting for my life on an operating table, the rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. Dr. Harlow told me the surgery had gone well, that my heart was strong. I thanked him and tried to focus, but his words felt distant. Florence stayed the whole time. She made calls. She took notes. At some point, a nurse brought dinner, and I forced myself to eat. By the time the sun started to set, I had gone through every message. The picture was complete. Margot had used a forged power of attorney to sell Brookfield for $1.2 million. The buyer had paid in cash. The deed had been recorded the day after my surgery. The money had been transferred into an account I did not recognize. It was not a mistake. It was deliberate, calculated, done. There was a knock at the door just after 7. Florence opened it, and Gerald Hutchinson stepped inside. He was 58, silver-haired, with the kind of calm, steady presence you wanted in a lawyer. He had handled my estate planning years ago. I trusted him. He shook my hand carefully and pulled a chair closer. Then he opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. "Lawrence," he said quietly. "Before we talk about what happened this week, there's something you need to know. Something I've been holding for you for 18 years. I looked at him, confused. Florence leaned forward. Gerald set the file on the bed and opened it. Inside were documents I recognized. Deeds, trust papers, things I had signed nearly 2 decades ago and then filed away, half forgotten. "When you set up Prairie Holdings," Gerald said, "you made me the trustee. You wanted to protect certain assets, keep them separate, anonymous." He paused. "One of those assets is a piece of land, 85 acres in Stonebridge County." I stared at him. "The Riverside Commerce Center." He nodded. "Margot's been leasing that land for 3 years, through an intermediary. She doesn't know you own it." The room went very quiet. Florence's hand went to her mouth. Gerald tapped the file. "There's a clause in the lease, Section 23. If the tenant engages in fraudulent activity or breaches fiduciary duty to the landowner, The lease is void. All improvements revert to the owner. I looked down at the papers, then back at Gerald. She's building her entire project on my land. Yes, he said. And she has no idea. Gerald set a document down on the hospital tray. I recognized my own signature at the bottom, but I had never seen this paper in my life. My head felt heavy from the pain medication, but I forced myself to look. It was a deed. Old with that faint yellow tinge that comes with age. What is this? I asked. Gerald pulled his chair closer. Florence leaned in. Do you remember your Uncle Albert? Gerald asked. I nodded slowly. My mother's brother. A quiet man who had passed away in 2005. He left you 85 acres, commercial zoning. Not worth much then, but you saw potential. You bought out the other heirs. I stared at the deed. Riverside Commerce Center. The name stirred something faint in my mind. In 2006, you were very specific about keeping it private. We created Prairie Holdings, LLC, registered in Wyoming. Your name doesn't appear on public record. Florence frowned. Who manages it? Norman Hayes, through Heartland Property Services, for nearly 20 years, collecting rent, paying taxes. You get annual reports through me. You signed off every year without much attention. I felt embarrassed. I should have paid more attention. Someone's leasing it. Gerald pulled out a thicker document. A lease agreement, 3 years old. This is the current tenant, he said, sliding it toward me. I looked at the first page. Carter Development Corporation. Below that, lessee. At the bottom, a signature line. Margot Caldwell, President and CEO. The room tilted. I gripped the tray. Carter Development, I said slowly. That's Margot's company. Gerald nodded. She registered it 6 years ago. Wanted her own brand, separate from the family name. I stared in disbelief. I've been seeing this name on reports, year after year. I thought it was just some firm Norman had found. You had no reason to connect it to Margot, Gerald said gently. The name was different, and Carter Development has been an excellent tenant, paid on time, maintained the property, followed every term. Florence's hand went to her mouth. She's been paying rent to her own father for 3 years, and neither of them knew. Correct, Gerald said. To Margot, the landlord is Prairie Holdings, LLC, a faceless business entity. She has no idea her father is on the other side. I could not stop staring at Margot's signature. Familiar loops and angles. But seeing it here felt like looking at a stranger. 3 years, I said quietly. 120,000 per year. 360,000 total, Gerald confirmed. What's she building on it? New Riverside Estates, her flagship project. Luxury townhomes. The groundbreaking ceremony is scheduled for the first week of June. She's invited over 400 people, investors, contractors, city officials, media. I closed my eyes. Riverside Estates. Margot had been talking about it for over a year. At Thanksgiving, at Christmas. She was so proud. This was going to put Carter Development on the map, and she had been building it on my land. For 3 years. Without either of us knowing. Gerald flipped through the lease to a page near the back. One clause was highlighted in yellow. Section 23. Read that clause, Gerald said, his voice more serious. Then tell me if you want to fight back. I forced myself to focus through the medication fog. Section 23. Material breach and termination. If the tenant engages in fraudulent conduct, elder abuse, or criminal activity that materially harms the landowner, the lease shall be deemed void immediately. Upon such breach, the tenant must vacate the property and remove all improvements within 30 days at tenant's sole expense. Or B, negotiate in good faith to sell all improvements to landowner at fair market value. If no agreement is reached within 60 days, landowner shall have the irrevocable right to purchase all improvements at independently appraised fair market value, minus any damages incurred. I read it again, then a third time. This means... I started my throat tight. It means, Gerald said carefully, that if Margot committed fraud against you, which she did, the lease is void. Immediately. Florence's eyes widened. And then Margot has two choices, Gerald said. Remove all improvements within 30 days, at her own expense, or negotiate to sell everything to Lawrence. And if she refuses both, then Lawrence has the legal right to purchase all improvements at appraised value minus damages. Gerald paused. Given that she defrauded him out of $1.2 million, he could potentially acquire $8 million worth of construction for a fraction of the cost, or even nothing at all if damages equal or exceed the appraised value. I stared at the highlighted clause. "Oh, she won't tear it down," I said slowly. Dismantling $8 million of construction in 30 days would bankrupt her. Exactly, Gerald said. Which means she'll be forced to negotiate with you, the man she just betrayed, and she'll have no leverage. Because if she refuses, you can force the purchase. The machines kept beeping. My heart kept beating. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. Then what happens when I invoke this clause? She loses everything, Gerald said simply. She loses control. The groundbreaking ceremony becomes meaningless. Every investor, every contractor, every buyer, they'll all know the project is built on land she doesn't control. On land owned by the father she just defrauded while he was undergoing life-saving surgery. He leaned forward. She'll have 30 days to negotiate a sale or watch her flagship project get dismantled. And every day that passes, her investors will be asking questions. Her contractors will be demanding guarantees. Her buyers will be pulling out. The longer she waits, the less the project is worth. I looked back down at the lease, at Margot's signature so confident, at section 23 glowing yellow. What do I need to do? I asked quietly. Gerald pulled out a legal pad. First, we document everything. The fraud, the forged power of attorney, the sale of Brookfield while you were unconscious. We build a timeline proving elder abuse. Then we prepare a formal breach notification letter citing Section 23. He paused, meeting my eyes. And then when the time is right, when it will have maximum impact, we deliver it. Publicly. In a way she'll never forget. In a way that makes it clear to everyone watching that actions have consequences. I nodded slowly. My hand rested on the lease, my fingers tracing Section 23. This was not revenge. This was consequence. This was accountability. This was what happened when you betrayed the person who had given you everything. And Margot was about to learn that lesson the hard way. They released me on April 10th, a week after the surgery. I could not go home. Brookfield was not mine anymore. Florence drove me to her place, instead a small house she had bought after her divorce. The guest room was ready with clean sheets and a lamp on the nightstand. She had even picked up some of my clothes from Brookfield before Charles Montgomery took possession. Moving was harder than I expected. Every step reminded me that my chest had been opened and put back together. The doctors had been clear. No lifting, no driving, no stress. I almost laughed at that last one. Florence helped me to the back porch. It was a modest space, just wide enough for 2 chairs and a small table between them. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak tree in the yard, casting shadows across the weathered boards. From here you could see farmland stretching out toward the tree line. Somewhere beyond those trees was Brookfield, but I kept my eyes on the fields closer in. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. Florence brought soup and a glass of water, setting them on the table beside me. Dr. Harlow had given her detailed instructions. Pain medication every 6 hours. Blood thinners twice a day. Short walks around the house to keep circulation going. She was taking it seriously. "You need to rest," she said. I am resting. She did not look convinced. The first few days passed slowly. My body was still healing, demanding sleep whether I wanted it or not. Florence checked on me constantly, brought meals, reminded me about pills, asked how I was feeling, and I told her I was fine even when I was not. On the third day, Martha Donovan came by. Martha had lived next to Brookfield for as long as I had owned it. 68 years old, sharp-minded, with a garden that could feed half the county. She came in carrying a casserole dish covered in foil. "I heard you were here," she said, setting it on the coffee table. "Made you some chicken and rice, easy to digest." "Thank you, Martha." She sat down on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. Something was bothering her. "What is it?" I asked. She glanced at Florence, then back at me. "I need to tell you something. About Margot." I straightened slightly, ignoring the pull in my chest. "I saw her," Martha continued. "At Brookfield, the day before your surgery." My breath caught. She was there with a man. A realtor, I think. They were walking the property. He was taking pictures, measuring things. I thought maybe she was helping you with something. An appraisal, perhaps. "What else did you see?" My voice came out quieter than I intended. Martha hesitated. "I was out by the fence line, close enough to hear part of their conversation. She said something that stuck with me." She paused. She said, "I'll own this place soon." Just like that, matter of fact. Florence leaned forward. "You're certain?" "I'm certain," Martha said. "It bothered me at the time because, well, you were about to have major surgery, Lawrence. You had not even gone to the hospital yet. And she was already talking about owning your land." The room felt smaller, colder. I could hear my pulse in my ears. "She planned it," I said quietly, "before I ever went under." Martha nodded. "I'm sorry I didn't say something then. I didn't know she would actually. It's not your fault." But inside, something was hardening. This was not a mistake, not a moment of poor judgment. Margot had stood on my property the day before my surgery and talked about owning it like the deal was already done. She had planned this. Martha stayed a little longer, but the conversation felt strained. When she left, Florence walked her to the door. I moved back to the porch, settling into the chair again. The afternoon light had shifted, longer shadows stretching across the yard. That evening, my phone rang. "Connor," I answered. "Hello." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, I'm in my room. I need to talk to you." "What's wrong?" I could hear him breathing fast and shallow. "I found something. On Mom's laptop. Files. Emails." He paused. "Grandpa, I think she planned this before you even had surgery." My hand tightened on the phone. "What kind of files?" "I can't explain right now. Can I see you tomorrow? I'll tell Mom I'm going to a friend's house." "Yes. Come here. Florence's place. Do you know where it is?" "I'll find it." "Connor," I said carefully. "Are you safe?" A pause. "I don't know." I closed my eyes. "Come tomorrow. Bring whatever you found." Silence on the other end. Then a soft sound like he was trying not to cry. Grandpa," he said, voice breaking. "If Mom finds out I'm helping you, she'll never forgive me." My throat tightened. I thought about Margot standing at Brookfield the day before my surgery, about the forged signature, about the voicemail, about 3 years of rent she had been paying me without knowing. "I know, Connor," I said quietly. "I'm sorry I'm putting you in this position." Another long silence. Then so soft, I almost missed it. She doesn't deserve forgiveness, Grandpa, you do." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone in my hand. Florence came back and found me still on the porch, the evening settling in around us. "What happened?" "Connor's coming tomorrow," I said. "He has evidence." She nodded slowly. "Then we get ready. I looked out toward the darkening fields, toward the tree line where Brookfield lay beyond. The land was gone. But I was not done. Not even close. Connor showed up at Florence's door at 2 in the afternoon on April 12th. He looked like he had not slept in days. The USB drive in his hand was shaking. Florence let him in and locked the door behind him. I watched from the recliner as he stood in the middle of the living room, shoulders hunched, eyes red. Then he started crying. "I'm betraying my mother," he said, voice breaking. "What kind of son does that?" Florence moved to him immediately, pulling him into a hug. He was taller than her now, almost 16, but he folded into her arms like a child. "You're doing the right thing," she said quietly. "That takes courage." Connor," I said carefully. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He interrupted, pulling back from Florence and wiping his face with his sleeve. "What she did to you was wrong. It was wrong, and I can't pretend I don't know." He held out the USB drive. His hand was still trembling. "There are 57 files on here," he said. "I copied everything I could find before she got home from work." Florence took the drive and brought her laptop to the coffee table. I leaned forward, ignoring the pull in my chest. Connor sat down on the couch, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. Florence opened the laptop and plugged in the drive. A folder appeared. 57 files, just like Connor said. Documents, spreadsheets, PDFs, email threads. She opened the first one. Practice_signatures.pdf. The screen filled with rows of signatures. My signature. Over and over again. Some shaky and uncertain. Others smoother, more confident. I counted at least 50 attempts, each one a little closer to the way I actually signed my name. At the bottom of some pages, there were handwritten notes in Margot's handwriting. Lighter pressure. Slower strokes. Angle the W more. The date stamp at the top of the document read, March 28, 2024, 6 days before my surgery. Florence looked at me. I could not speak. Connor's voice was quiet. She practiced for days. I found that file in a folder called Legal Prep. Florence clicked to the next file, an email thread. To Carl Jennings, Notary Public, Nevada. Subject: Urgent Notarization Service. The first email was from Margot. I recognized her writing style immediately. It need a power of attorney notarized on April 3rd. Signer will not be present. Willing to pay $7,000 cash for discretion and expedited service. Please confirm availability. The reply from Carl Jennings came 2 hours later. Our cash only. My office, 2:00 p.m. Bring the document and payment. I stared at the screen. $7,000. To notarize a forged signature. While I was unconscious in a hospital, Florence scrolled through more emails. There were at least a dozen back and forth with Carl Jennings. Logistics, timing, assurances of confidentiality. Connor spoke again, still staring at his hands. There's more. Florence opened another folder. Documents related to the Brookfield sale. Purchase agreements. Transfer paperwork. Timeline schedules. She had everything ready before your surgery, Connor said quietly. The buyer was already lined up. Charles Montgomery. The contracts were drafted March 25th, a week and a half before you went under. I felt the weight of it settling over me. This was not panic, not desperation. This was planning, calculation, premeditation. Florence pulled up another file. Margot's calendar from March and April. Appointments highlighted in red. March 20th. Meet with Realtor. Brookfield Appraisal. March 25th. Contract Review. Montgomery. March 28th. Practice Documentation. April 2nd. Travel Arrangements. Nevada. April 3rd. Notary Appointment, 2:00 p.m. She scheduled the notary appointment for the exact time you'd be in surgery. Connor said, his voice breaking. She knew. She planned it down to the hour. Florence sat back, hand over her mouth. I looked at Connor. His face was pale, exhausted, the weight of what he had discovered pressing down on him like a physical thing. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Emails between Mom and her business partner, Patrick Doyle. He's the CFO for Riverside Estates." He pulled up an email thread. The subject line read, "Urgent. Investor Fund Reconciliation." Patrick's email was direct. "Margot, we need to talk immediately. The numbers don't match what you've been reporting. I've found transfers I can't account for. If you don't have an explanation by Friday, I'm obligated to report this to the investor board." Margot's response was cold. "Patrick, you're overreacting to minor accounting errors. I'll handle it personally. Do not contact the board. We'll discuss this when I'm ready." Connor looked at me. "I think there's more she's hiding. Financial things. But I couldn't find the details. Patrick knows, though, and he's scared of her." Florence closed the laptop slowly. The room felt smaller, colder. "Connor," I said carefully, "this is more than I expected. More than I asked you to find." He shook his head. "I had to get it all, because if I only gave you half, if you went after her with half the evidence, she'd destroy what was left. I had to get everything I could reach." I felt a surge of pride mixed with heartbreak. 16 years old, and he had thought like an investigator, like someone who understood that partial evidence was worse than none. Florence reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're very brave," she said. He shook his head. "I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm destroying my family." "Your mother did that," I said gently. "Not you." Connor looked at me, searching my face for something. Permission, maybe. Or forgiveness. I nodded. "You did the right thing." An hour later, Gerald arrived. Florence had called him from the kitchen while Connor and I sat with the laptop. He came in quickly, briefcase in hand, and sat down at the coffee table without a word. We walked him through everything. The practice signatures, the emails to Carl Jennings, the pre-surgery planning, the calendar entries showing she had arranged everything down to the hour, the warning emails from Patrick Doyle about financial discrepancies. Gerald took notes, asked questions, examined every file with the careful attention of someone building a case. When we finished, he sat back and looked at Connor with something like awe. "This is remarkable," he said. "You've documented premeditation, forgery, elder abuse, all time-stamped." He turned to me. "Lawrence, this Patrick Doyle, if he's willing to talk, if he has access to the financial records, this could be much bigger than Brookfield." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a cold certainty settling into my bones. "What do we do next?" I asked. Gerald looked at me steadily. "We find Patrick Doyle, and then we make sure everyone knows exactly what she did." 2 days later, a man I had never met knocked on Florence's door. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, extending his hand. "My name is Patrick Doyle. I used to be your daughter's CFO. We need to talk." Florence hesitated, looking back at me. I nodded, and she let him in. Patrick Doyle was 45, maybe older. His suit was wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He carried a worn leather briefcase. When he sat at the kitchen table, his hands were shaking slightly. "While I helped her cook the books," he said without preamble. "I need you to know that up front. I'm not innocent. But I'm here because she was going to destroy me anyway." I studied him carefully. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Patrick said. "But you should trust these." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Financial documents, bank statements, spreadsheets. He spread them across the table like evidence at a crime scene. "I've been CFO at Carter Development for 3 years," he said. "Loyal. Did everything she asked. Last month I found a document on the printer she'd left by accident. Post-project restructuring plan." He pulled out a single sheet and slid it toward me. I could see Margot's handwriting in the margins. There, highlighted in yellow, was Patrick's name with a note: Eliminate CFO position. Restructure management post-launch. She was going to fire me, Patrick said quietly. Right after the groundbreaking ceremony. After 3 years of helping her build this company. Florence set coffee in front of him. He wrapped his hands around it, but did not drink. So this is revenge, I asked. Huh, this is survival, Patrick corrected. If she goes down for fraud, she's going to blame me. Claim I was the one who embezzled. That I cooked the books without her knowledge. I need to get ahead of that. He pushed another document toward me. An investor pitch deck. Professional. Glossy. Riverside Estates. Executive summary. $15 million project, Patrick said. She raised $6 million from 18 investors. Local business people. Friends of the family. People who trusted her. He pulled out bank statements. Official letterhead and account numbers. But only $4.2 million actually made it to the project account, he continued. $1.8 million was diverted. He spread out more papers, transaction records, highlighted in different colors. $900,000 in cash withdrawals. No receipts, no documentation. I'm guessing gambling based on what I've seen, but I can't prove that. $600,000 transferred to an offshore account. Cayman Islands. Shell company set up 2 years ago. $300,000 in personal expenses charged to the company. Luxury purchases, a car, jewelry, hotel stays, all disguised as business expenses with fake invoices. Florence leaned over my shoulder reading the documents. I could feel her tension. You created fake invoices, I asked. Patrick nodded, not meeting my eyes. She asked me to. Said we needed to balance the books. Make everything look legitimate for investors. I warned her it was illegal. She told me to adjust the numbers and stop worrying. He finally looked up. I should have walked away then, I know that. But I had a mortgage. 2 kids in college. I told myself it was just creative accounting. That we'd make it right once the project was profitable. But the project was never going to be profitable, I said quietly. Not with 1.8 million missing. No, Patrick agreed. It wasn't. We sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Florence refilled Patrick's coffee, though he still had not touched it. I called Gerald, Florence said. He's on his way. Patrick nodded. Good. I want this documented. I want protection. Because when this blows up, Margot's going to come after everyone. And I'm the easiest target. Gerald arrived 20 minutes later. He set his briefcase on the table and began examining Patrick's documents without greeting anyone. He moved methodically, checking logos, comparing account numbers, making notes on his legal pad. After about an hour, he pulled out his phone and dialed. He put it on speaker. First National Bank, how may I help you? This is Gerald Hutchinson, attorney. I need to verify account activity for account number ending in 4739. There was typing on the other end. That account is registered to Carter Development Corporation. I can confirm it exists, but I'll need authorization to discuss specific transactions. That's all I need, thank you. He hung up and looked at Patrick. Your documents are authentic. Bank logos match. Account numbers are real. The transactions you've documented are verifiable. Patrick let out a breath he seemed to have been holding. Gerald turned to him, expression serious. You'll need to testify. Cooperate with federal investigators. Possibly wear a wire. Are you willing? Patrick met his eyes. If it keeps me out of prison, yes. I'll do whatever it takes. Gerald made a note. Then he looked at me. With Connor's digital evidence and Patrick's insider testimony, this case is airtight. We have documentation from 2 independent sources. We have motive means and a clear timeline. He paused. Lawrence, we can proceed with criminal prosecution, elder abuse, wire fraud, embezzlement, federal charges, 10 to 15 years in prison. I looked at Patrick across the table. He was not a hero. He was a man trying to save himself. But his guilt, his complicity, his fear, all of it worked in my favor now. I looked back at Gerald. Do it. Gerald closed his folder. Once we file, there's no going back. This will be public. Federal investigators will get involved. The media will cover it. Margot will face consequences that go far beyond losing Riverside Estates. I know, I said, and you're prepared for that. I thought about the voicemail. About waking up from surgery to find everything gone. About Connor crying holding a USB drive full of evidence against his own mother. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. Gerald nodded slowly. He gathered the documents and placed them in his briefcase. Patrick stood looking smaller, diminished by his own confession. I'll be in touch, Gerald said to Patrick. Don't contact Margot. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. Keep your phone on. Patrick nodded and left without another word. After the door closed, Gerald turned to me. This is the point of no return, Lawrence. Once we move forward, Margot's life changes forever. Are you certain? I looked at Florence. She met my eyes and nodded once. I looked back at Gerald. To do it. Gerald spent the next 2 weeks building a case that would change my daughter's life forever. I helped him with every step. The first thing we needed was medical proof. Gerald filed a records request with Stonebridge Regional Hospital, and within 3 days my entire surgical file arrived. 200 pages of documentation. Every note. Every timestamp. Every decision made while I was unconscious. We spread it across Florence's dining table. Gerald went through it methodically, highlighting key sections. The anesthesia log showed I went under at 8:45 in the morning on April 3rd. Surgery began at 9. The operation finished at 5:30 in the afternoon. I was moved to the ICU, still sedated, still on a ventilator. Gerald pulled out the forged power of attorney. The notarization timestamp read, 2:15 p.m. April 3rd. You were in the middle of surgery, Gerald said. There's no ambiguity here. He called Dr. Harlow and requested a sworn affidavit. 2 days later, it arrived. The language was clinical and precise. Patient was under general anesthesia and medically incapacitated during the entire period in question. But Gerald wanted more than medical records. He wanted visual proof. He contacted hospital security and requested footage from the ICU for April 3rd. It took a week to process, but eventually a USB drive arrived with time-stamped video. We watched it together. The camera showed me motionless in bed, a ventilator tube down my throat, machines breathing for me. Gerald made 3 copies of that footage. This is irrefutable, he said. On April 20th, Detective Frank Holland arrived at Florence's house. He was 43 with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that came from years of investigating crimes most people did not want to think about. He shook my hand carefully and sat down at the kitchen table with a folder thick with notes. Mr. Caldwell, he said. I've been reviewing your case for the past week. This is textbook elder abuse. I want you to know I take these cases personally. Why? I asked. Because my father went through something similar, Holland said quietly. My sister forged his signature to access his retirement accounts. By the time we found out, he'd lost everything. He paused. We didn't have the evidence to prosecute, you do. He opened his folder and walked us through what his investigation had uncovered. Carl Jennings, the Nevada notary, had 3 prior complaints filed against him for improper notarizations. He was still licensed because Nevada's oversight system had loopholes. What mattered more was Margot's travel. Holland had subpoenaed her records. She had flown to Las Vegas on April 2nd. She rented a car. She stayed at a hotel in Carson City. Her credit card showed a cash withdrawal the morning of April 2nd. She flew to Nevada the day before your surgery, Holland said. She withdrew cash. Then she went to the notary's office. We have documentation putting her there. Gerald leaned forward. That proves premeditation. Exactly, Holland said. She didn't forge your signature on impulse. She planned it. She bought a plane ticket. She withdrew cash. She drove across state lines to find someone who would stamp a fraudulent document. I sat back processing it all. Every piece of evidence made it harder to see Margot as my daughter. She was becoming something else. A stranger who had calculated every move. What charges can you bring? I asked. Holland pulled out a legal pad with handwritten notes. Elder abuse, which is a felony in this state. Forgery, also a felony. Wire fraud because she used electronic banking systems, that's federal. Identity theft. He paused. And if Patrick Doyle's information checks out embezzlement, that's a separate federal charge. He looked at me. With the evidence we have, a prosecutor will take this case immediately. When can you arrest her? I asked. Holland glanced at Gerald. Whenever you're ready. I can have a warrant signed within 48 hours. Gerald shook his head. We wait. Holland frowned. Wait for what? To June 1st, Gerald said. Her groundbreaking ceremony. I watched understanding dawn on Holland's face. 400 guests. Gerald continued. Investors, contractors, city council members, local media. She'll be celebrating the launch of Riverside Estates. And that's when we serve the warrant. Holland smiled just slightly. I like the way you think. He stood gathering his folder. I'll coordinate with the prosecutor's office. We'll have everything ready. But Mr. Caldwell, you need to understand, once we do this, it's public. The arrest will be covered. Your daughter's name will be in the news. There's no taking it back. I know, I said. Holland nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. People like her, they don't stop unless someone stops them. After he left Gerald, and I sat at the table in silence. Florence brought coffee but did not say anything. She just set the cups down and squeezed my shoulder. Gerald opened his briefcase and pulled out a presentation file. Slides. Documents organized by category. Evidence arranged in sequence. I've been putting this together, he said. For June 1st, everything we've collected. Medical records, hospital footage, the signature comparisons, Connor's files, Patrick's information when we get it. He showed me the opening slide, a timeline. March 20th through April 6th. Every action Margot had taken mapped out with precision. We present this at the groundbreaking, Gerald said, in front of everyone. Before the arrest, I stared at the screen, at the evidence we had gathered, at the case we had built piece by piece over 2 weeks of careful work. 5 weeks until the groundbreaking, Gerald said finally. She'll be standing on stage, in front of everyone, celebrating. I thought about the voicemail, her cheerful voice. Congratulations on surviving the surgery, Dad. And that's when you want to do this? Gerald asked, watching me carefully. I looked at the medical records still spread across the table. The security footage, the travel documentation, the practice signatures Connor had found. All of it organized and ready. Yes, I said. That's when. While we built the case against her, Margot called me twice. Both times she sounded confident. The first call came on April 24th. I was sitting at Florence's kitchen table when my phone rang, surrounded by documents Gerald had been organizing. Evidence we were still cataloging. I stared at my daughter's name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Dad, Margot said. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. How are you feeling? Is the recovery going okay? I kept my voice weak, defeated. Slow. I'm still at Florence's. Can't do much on my own yet. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. But she did not sound sorry. She sounded relieved. Listen, I need you to understand something about Brookfield. Here it was. You're 62 years old. You just had major heart surgery. Be honest with yourself, were you really going to be able to maintain 300 acres at your age with your health? I said nothing. Let her fill the silence. I did you a favor, Dad. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but I removed a burden. That farm was killing you. Mom's been gone for 3 years. Holding on to Brookfield wasn't going to bring her back. My hand tightened on the phone. You've always been too sentimental, too attached to the past. It's time to let go, to let me build something for our family's future, something that actually has value. The medical records were spread in front of me, proof that she had forged my signature while I fought for my life, and she was telling me she had done me a favor. I suppose you're right, I said quietly. Relief flooded her voice. I knew you'd understand eventually. You always do. That's why you're such a good father, a good father. To the daughter who had stolen everything from him. The money's going into Riverside Estates. You're going to see what I've built, and you're going to be so proud. I'm sure I will be, I said flatly. She did not catch the tone. Or maybe she did not want to. I have to run, but I love you, Dad. We'll talk soon. She hung up. I set the phone down among the evidence. Gerald, who had been listening from across the table, just shook his head. Gaslighting, he said quietly. Making you feel like she did you a favor by stealing from you. The second call came 2 weeks later. May 15th. This time Margot sounded excited. Dad, I'm sending you an invitation to the groundbreaking ceremony for Riverside Estates, June 1st. I heard papers shuffling in the background. It's going to be incredible. 400 guests, investors, city council members. The governor might even attend. This is the moment Carter Development becomes a major player. She paused. Her voice softened. I want you there, Dad. I need you there. Because everything I've built started with what you taught me. About construction. About building things that last. The irony was suffocating. Will you come? Please, I know we've had complications, but I want you to see what I've created. What we've created together, really. Because none of this would exist without you. Without me. She meant without my money. Without my land. Without forging my signature. And Dad, I want Connor to see you supporting me. He's been acting strange lately. Distant. I think he's struggling with the rumors about Trevor and me. If you're there, if he sees that you and I are okay, it might help him. She was using Connor now, using my grandson as leverage. I thought about Detective Holland, about the arrest warrant, about 400 witnesses. I'll be there, Margot, I said. Her breath caught. Really, oh Dad, thank you. You won't regret it. Riverside Estates is going to be extraordinary. It's going to be my legacy, our family's legacy. Our family's legacy, built on fraud. Trevor's family will be there too. The Kingsleys, his mother Evelyn. I want them to see that my own father supports what I'm doing, that I have my family behind me. So that was it. She needed me there to prove something to the Kingsleys, to show them she was worthy. I understand, I said. I love you, Dad. I know I don't say it enough, but everything I've done has been because I love this family, because I want to build something that will make you proud. After she hung up, I sat with the phone for a long time. Connor showed up that evening. He looked exhausted. Mom bought a new Mercedes, he said. 80,000, cash. And she redecorated the entire house. Another 80,000. Florence set a glass of water in front of him. She's planning a trip to Europe after the groundbreaking. First class, 5-star hotels. She told her friends that you gave her permission, that you and she are closer than ever. He looked at me. She really believes it, Grandpa. She thinks she won. Gerald arrived an hour later. We sat around the kitchen table with the invitation Margot had sent. Heavy cardstock, Embossed lettering, gold trim. Riverside Estates. Groundbreaking ceremony. June 1st, 2024. She has no idea, Gerald said. None, I confirmed. I picked up the invitation, ran my finger along the gold trim, 2 weeks away. She hasn't won, I said quietly. She just doesn't know she's lost yet. Connor told me about the Kingsley family on an afternoon in mid-May. I had never paid much attention to Trevor's family before. That was a mistake. We were sitting on Florence's back porch. Connor had stopped by after school, still in his jacket and backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days. "So, Grandpa," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "You asked me once why Mom became the way she is. I think I know." I waited. "It's Dad," Connor said, "and his family. He told me things I should have known years ago. Things I should have seen, but had been too busy, too distant, too trusting to notice. Trevor had been having affairs for 10 years. Not one, not two. Multiple women rotating through like a schedule, and he did not bother hiding it. He brought his mistresses to company events, introduced them to colleagues, made Margot stand there and smile while he flirted openly. "The current one is Amber," Connor said, voice flat. "She's 29. Dad's 40. It's embarrassing." "Your mother tried to leave," I asked. 2 years ago, Connor confirmed. "She talked to a divorce lawyer, but Dad's lawyer pulled out the prenup. If she divorces him without proving fault, adultery abuse, something documented, she gets nothing. And Dad's smart. He never hits her. Never leaves evidence, just destroys her slowly." Connor looked out at the yard. "Mom has no independent income. Carter Development barely breaks even most years. Her whole lifestyle depends on Dad's money. If she leaves, she loses the house, loses her company funding, loses everything." I thought about Margot, about how trapped she must have felt. But I also thought about Brookfield, about my forged signature, about waking up from surgery to find everything gone. "What about his family?" I asked. Connor's expression darkened. "Grandma Evelyn," he explained. "The Kingsley family was old money, banking dynasty, East Coast elite, the kind of people who measured worth in generations and bloodlines. Trevor's mother, Evelyn, had never accepted Margot. Not from the beginning. She calls Mom a country girl," Connor said. "To her face, at family dinners. She introduces Mom to guests as Trevor's current wife, like Mom's temporary, like she's just another one of Dad's mistakes. And Trevor lets her do this. Trevor laughs," Connor said bitterly. "He thinks it's funny." Connor told me about a family dinner last year. Evelyn had asked him right in front of Margot. "Connor, darling, do you ever wish your father had married someone better?" Mom cried in the car afterward, Connor said quietly. "She always cries after those dinners. But she keeps going back, keeps trying to fit in, keeps hoping they'll accept her." Carter Development, Connor explained, was not just about business. It was Margot's attempt to prove herself. To show the Kingsleys she was not just some country girl who got lucky, that she could build something, that she belonged in their world. She wanted them to respect her," Connor said. "She thought if she could make Carter Development successful, maybe they'd finally see her as an equal." "When did the gambling start?" I asked. "About 18 months ago, right after Christmas at the Kingsley estate." Connor described it. A lavish party, designer gifts for everyone. Evelyn had given Trevor's sister a Hermes bag, given Connor's cousins expensive watches. When it came time for Margot's gift, Evelyn had handed her a small envelope. Inside was a gift card. To Target. $50. She said, "I thought you'd prefer this, dear, since you're used to simpler things." Margot had smiled, thanked her. But Connor saw her hands shaking. Mom started playing online poker that week, he said. At first it was just a few hands at night, then more. Then she was staying up until 3 in the morning, losing thousands. How much, I asked. 900,000 over 18 months, Connor said. Some of it's debt. Loan sharks. I've heard her on the phone. They threaten her. Say they'll tell Dad. Tell the Kingsleys. I felt something cold settle in my chest. $900,000. Desperate attempts to escape, to win back what she had lost, to solve everything with one big score that never came. She's not evil, Grandpa, Connor said quietly. She's desperate, broken, trapped, but he looked at me, eyes older than they should be. But that doesn't make what she did to you right. Wrong is wrong, regardless of why she did it. I nodded slowly. Yes, it is. We sat in silence for a while. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. I thought about Margot's life, about Trevor's cruelty, about Evelyn's calculated humiliation, about a woman so desperate to prove her worth that she gambled away a fortune and stole from her own father. I felt something flicker, not quite pity, not quite forgiveness, maybe understanding. Then I remembered the voicemail, her cheerful voice. Congratulations on surviving the surgery, Dad. But your legacy didn't. The flicker died. The Kingsleys will be at the groundbreaking, Connor said. Front row. They're major investors, Grandma Evelyn insisted. I looked at him. They invested in Riverside Estates. 200,000, Connor confirmed. She wanted to make sure she had a stake, so she could control Mom, so she could take credit if it succeeded and blame Mom if it failed. Of course she did. People like Evelyn Kingsley always hedged their bets. They'll be watching, Connor said. When everything happens, they'll see it all. I thought about Evelyn, about her cruelty, about Trevor and his mistresses, about Margot desperate to prove herself to people who would never accept her. Let them watch, I said. May 31st. Tomorrow was June 1st. Tomorrow was the groundbreaking. Tonight I could not sleep. I lay in the guest bed at Florence's house, staring at the ceiling. The clock on the nightstand read 11:15. I had been lying there for over an hour watching shadows from the streetlight outside shift across the wall. 8 weeks since the surgery. My chest had healed. The scar was still there, a thin red line down my sternum, but the pain was gone. Physically, I was recovered. But tonight my mind would not quiet. I got up, moved to the window. Through the trees in the distance, I could just make out the red roof of Brookfield's barn. Charles Montgomery's barn now. Someone else's home. I pulled out my wallet and found the photograph I kept tucked behind my driver's license. Eleanor, our wedding day. She was 22, smiling in a way that made her whole face light up. Gone 10 years now, but some nights like tonight, it felt like yesterday. I sat in the chair by the window holding the photo. What if I'm wrong? I whispered to her face. She's still my daughter. The photo did not answer. It never did. But sometimes talking to Eleanor helped me think, yeah, what if this breaks Connor? What if I'm doing permanent damage to that boy? I thought about Connor crying in this living room, about the USB drive shaking in his hand, about his voice on the phone, she doesn't deserve forgiveness. You do. Am I doing this for justice? I asked the photograph. Or am I just getting revenge? The line between the two felt thin tonight. Blurry. Eleanor, I said quietly, what would you want me to do? There was a soft sound at the doorway. I looked up. Florence stood there in her bathrobe, arms crossed. Can't sleep? She asked. No. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed. Having second thoughts, I looked back at the photo in my hands. She's still my daughter Flo. What kind of father does this? What kind of child does what she did? Florence countered gently. Maybe I'm no better than her, I said, taking everything she's built, destroying her life. You're not taking anything, Florence said firmly. She built that project on land she doesn't own, with money stolen from you and 18 investors. You're not taking, you're telling the truth. The truth is going to hurt Connor. Haknita, Connor already knows the truth, Florence said. That's why he came to you. The boy chose honesty over loyalty to his mother. Don't you dare dishonor that choice by backing out now. I looked at her. You think I'm doing the right thing? I think Margot crossed a line, Florence said. And if you let her get away with it, you're teaching Connor that family means you can do anything and get forgiven. Is that the lesson you want to leave him? I did not answer. Florence stood. Get some sleep, Lawrence. Tomorrow's a big day. She paused at the door. You're not the villain here. Remember that. After she left, I sat alone with Eleanor's photograph. I remembered a conversation we had had, years ago, before she got sick. We had been talking about Margot, about some trouble she had gotten into in college. Nothing serious. A bounced check, a lie about grades. Eleanor had said something I had never forgotten. Lawrence, you're too trusting. It's a beautiful quality, but it's also dangerous. You think I should be harder on her? I had asked. Why, I think if she ever really crosses a line, really crosses it, you shouldn't protect her from the consequences. That's not love. That's enabling. She's our daughter, which is exactly why you have to let her face her choices, Eleanor had said. Love her, but don't save her from herself. Promise me. I had promised. But at the time I had not understood what she meant. Now I did. I looked at the photograph, at Eleanor's smile. She crossed the line, I said quietly. She crossed it while I was on an operating table, while surgeons were keeping me alive. I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace, but something close. Like Eleanor was nodding, like she approved. This isn't revenge, I said aloud. This is accountability. There's a difference. I could love my daughter, and I could still hold her responsible for what she had done. Those two things were not mutually exclusive. I put the photograph back in my wallet, stood, looked out the window one more time toward the distant barn. I'm doing this for Connor, I whispered, and for me, but mostly for Connor. So he knows that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. I climbed back into bed. The clock read 2:45. I closed my eyes. Sleep finally came around 3. My phone buzzed just as I was drifting off. I reached for it, squinting at the screen. A text from Margot. "Ma, see you tomorrow, Dad. I can't wait for you to see what I've achieved. All of this is for our family. Love you so much." I stared at the message for a long time. Read it twice. 3 times. She had no idea, none. She thought tomorrow was her triumph. Thought I would be proud. Thought she had gotten away with everything. I set the phone down on the nightstand without replying. Tomorrow she would see exactly what she had achieved. Before I reveal what Lawrence said into that microphone in front of 400 witnesses, I need to know you're still with me. Drop a comment below. Do you think Margot deserves what's about to happen? Or should Lawrence have handled this differently? Your perspective matters to me. Also, please note, the following contains fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. If this isn't for you, feel free to stop here. June 1st. Clear sky. 400 people gathered on land I owned. My daughter had no idea. Gerald drove. Florence sat in the front passenger seat. Connor and I were in the back. None of us spoke much during the drive. There was nothing left to say. Everything had been said over the past 8 weeks. Now it was time. The Riverside Commerce Center looked different than I remembered. The last time I had been here years ago, it had been empty land. Grass and dirt and possibility. Now there were survey stakes, construction trailers, and a massive white tent erected in the center of the property. Cars lined the gravel parking area, hundreds of them. We parked near the back. Gerald grabbed his briefcase from the trunk. Connor helped me out of the car. I leaned on my cane, not because I needed it badly anymore, but because it was still easier than pretending I was fully healed. "You ready?" Florence asked quietly. I nodded. We walked toward the tent. The sun was lowering in the sky, casting everything in golden light. It was beautiful. The kind of evening people paid photographers to capture. Inside the tent, I could hear music playing. Soft jazz. The murmur of conversation and laughter. We entered through the back. No one noticed us at first. The tent was enormous with rows of white folding chairs facing a raised stage at the front. A banner hung behind the stage, Riverside Estates, groundbreaking ceremony. The sound system was professional. The catering looked expensive. Wine glasses glinted in the light. Staff in black vests moved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres. 400 people, maybe more. Investors in business suits. Local politicians glad-handing each other. Contractors I recognized from around the county. Media crews with cameras positioned near the stage. And in the front row, the Kingsley family. I spotted Trevor first. He was checking his phone, barely paying attention to the woman beside him, who was trying to talk to him, probably texting Amber. Next to him sat Evelyn Kingsley, Trevor's mother. She wore a pale blue dress and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my truck. Her expression was sour, like she was judging everyone and everything and finding it all lacking. "To back row?" I said to Gerald. He nodded. We made our way quietly to the last row of chairs and sat down. From here I could see everything. The stage, the crowd. Margot standing near the front greeting guests. She wore a dress I had never seen before. Custom-tailored, cream-colored. She looked radiant, happy. Connor sat beside me. His hands were clenched into fists on his knees. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Breathe," I said quietly. He nodded but did not relax. I scanned the crowd again. There near the side of the tent. Detective Holland. He was in plain clothes. Jeans and a button-down shirt. Blending in. Our eyes met briefly. He gave me the smallest nod. Near the parking area, I could see 3 uniformed officers standing casually. Margot probably thought they were event security. She had no idea. The music faded. A man in a suit stepped onto the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we'll begin shortly." The crowd settled. Conversations quieted. Chairs scraped as people sat down. I watched Margot move toward the stage. She climbed the steps, gracefully accepted the microphone from the man, and smiled out at the audience. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. Her voice was clear, confident. "This is a dream becoming reality." She launched into her speech, thanking investors by name, Harrison Cole, the Kingsley family. Others I did not recognize. She talked about vision and community and building something that would last for generations. "Riverside Estates isn't just a development," she said. "It's about legacy, about creating homes where families will grow, where memories will be made, about building something that endures." I felt Connor's shoulder tense under my hand. "This project has been made possible by the support of so many people," Margot continued. "My team, my investors, and most importantly, my family. The people who taught me the value of hard work, of integrity, of doing what's right." Connor's hands were shaking now. I squeezed his shoulder gently. Margot paused, scanning the crowd. Then her eyes found mine, in the back row. She froze for just a moment. Surprise flickered across her face. Then she smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "I see my father is here today," she said into the microphone. The crowd murmured, heads turning. "Dad, will you come up here?" I want everyone to meet the man who taught me about building things that last. 400 faces turned toward me. Connor whispered, "You can do this, Grandpa." I stood slowly, leaned on my cane. The crowd parted as I made my way down the center aisle. Each step was deliberate, measured. I could feel every eye on me, could hear the whispers. "That's her father. He looks like he's been sick. This is so sweet." I reached the stage, climbed the 2 steps carefully. Margot was waiting at the top, still beaming. She held out the microphone to me. "Would you like to say a few words?" she asked. Her voice was warm, loving. "Share this moment with me." I took the microphone from her hand. 400 people waited in silence. Margot's smile was genuine. She thought I was here to support her, to congratulate her, to forgive her. She thought this was reconciliation, redemption. I looked at my daughter. She was beautiful, happy, confident, standing at the pinnacle of her achievement, surrounded by investors and media and 400 witnesses, about to celebrate the launch of the project she had built with my stolen land and stolen money. She had no idea what was about to happen. "Thank you, Margot," I said into the microphone. My voice was steady, cold, steel. "I do have a few things to say." I stood on that stage and looked into 400 faces. Behind me on the enormous screen, Gerald had the first image ready. This was the moment. 8 weeks. 8 weeks of gathering evidence, of building a case, of preparing for this exact instant. I had 3 pieces of evidence to show them. Each one would change everything. "Thank you for letting me speak, Margot," I said, my voice carrying across the tent. "And thank you all for being here today." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the crowd. Investors in the front rows, contractors and architects in the middle, media crews with cameras pointed at the stage, the Kingsley family seated front and center, Evelyn's expression already tight with impatience, Trevor scrolling through his phone with barely concealed disinterest. 8 weeks ago, I underwent major heart surgery, a triple bypass, 8 hours on the operating table. Sympathetic murmurs rippled through the audience. I saw heads nodding, faces softening. These were people who understood medical crises, who had family members or friends who had faced similar ordeals. Chukisu, while I was undergoing that surgery, while doctors were repairing my heart, something happened to Brookfield Farm, the property I'd owned for 30 years. Beside me, Margot's smile began to falter. I watched it happen in slow motion, the way confidence starts to crack when it senses danger approaching. It was sold for $1.2 million. The murmuring grew louder. I saw people glancing at each other, confusion beginning to register. Harrison Cole leaned forward in his seat, his investor's instincts clearly pinging. This wasn't the celebration speech anyone had expected. Behind us, the screen lit up. Gerald had worked for hours perfecting this presentation. The side-by-side comparison was impossible to miss, impossible to misinterpret. On the left, the hospital timeline from Stonebridge Regional Medical Center. Surgery start 9 a.m. Surgery end 5:30 p.m. April 3rd, 2024. On the right, a power of attorney document. Notarized signature timestamp 2:15 p.m. April 3rd, 2024. This document, I said, pointing to the screen, shows that I signed a power of attorney at 2:15 p.m. on April 3rd. I let that hang in the air for a moment. But these surgical records show that at 2:15 p.m. I was on an operating table, unconscious, with a breathing tube down my throat. The gasps were audible now. I watched the realization spread through the crowd like a wave. Investors sat up straighter. Media crews adjusted their cameras. Even Trevor looked up from his phone, his expression shifting from boredom to sharp attention. Gerald advanced to the next slide. Hospital security footage timestamped 2:15 p.m. April 3rd, showing me motionless on a gurney, an anesthesia mask covering my face tubes and wires, connecting me to machines that were keeping me alive. It was physically impossible for me to sign anything. I continued, my voice steady. I couldn't hold a pen. I couldn't even breathe on my own. Margot's face had drained of all color. She stood frozen beside me, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I could see her mind racing, searching for an explanation, for a way to spin this, for anything that might stop what was happening. The screen changed again. Gerald had outdone himself with this one. A forensic signature comparison. 6 authentic Lawrence Caldwell signatures from various documents over the years, tax returns, property deeds, bank statements. Each one consistent. Each one clearly bearing the same hand, the same pressure, the same distinctive loop in the L and the sharp angle of the C. And then, isolated on the right side of the screen, the power of attorney signature from April 3rd. The differences were highlighted in red. The stroke size was wrong. The pressure was inconsistent. The angle of the letters was off by several degrees. Even to an untrained eye, even at a distance, the forgery was obvious. "This is not my signature," I said quietly. "Because I didn't sign it." The tent had gone completely silent. 400 people holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. Margot found her voice. "Dad, I can explain." I turned to look at her. My daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike on Brookfield's long driveway, who'd climbed the willow tree by the pond, who'd scattered her mother's ashes under its branches. The woman who had forged my name while I was fighting for my life 200 miles away. "No, Margot," I said, my voice still calm, still measured. "You can't explain how I signed a document while I was under anesthesia in Stonebridge, while I was unconscious on an operating table with a team of surgeons working to keep me alive. I let the pause stretch out, let the weight of those words settle over everyone in that tent. But I can explain. Someone forged my signature." The murmuring erupted into something louder now. Shocked voices, angry muttering from the investors, the Kingsley family exchanging sharp glances. Evelyn's face had gone rigid, her social mask slipping to reveal something harder beneath. The screen showed both images side by side, now the hospital footage with me intubated and motionless at 2:15 p.m. and the power of attorney with its forged signature time-stamped at that exact moment. Visual proof of impossibility, undeniable, irrefutable. Margot grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into the fabric of my jacket. Her voice came out in a desperate whisper that the microphone still picked up. "Dad, please." I gently removed her hand. Not roughly, not cruelly, but firmly. "There's more." I looked out at the crowd, at 400 faces now leaning forward in their chairs. Investors with hands on their phones. Media crews capturing every second. Contractors and architects whispering urgently to each other. Gerald nodded once. The screen changed again. More documents appeared. Email headers, invoice copies, flight records, hotel confirmations. A paper trail that stretched back weeks before my surgery, a timeline of premeditation that was about to become impossible to deny. Trevor had put his phone away completely now. Harrison Cole's expression had shifted from confusion to something that looked like fury, the fury of an investor realizing he'd been lied to. The Kingsley family sat rigid in their seats. Evelyn's hands gripped white-knuckled on her purse. And in the back row, I caught a glimpse of Connor, my grandson. 16 years old and terrified, but here watching his mother's world begin to collapse. I saw Florence beside him, her hand on his shoulder, steady and sure. I turned back to the microphone, to my daughter who stood beside me with guilt written across every line of her face, to the 400 witnesses who had come here expecting a celebration and were instead watching a reckoning. "I'm going to show you everything," I said, and then I did. I showed them the emails, one by one. 8 weeks of Connor hiding in his room, copying files from his mother's laptop while she slept. 8 weeks of Patrick Doyle gathering bank records, spreadsheets, invoices that proved what Margot had done. 8 weeks of Gerald building an undeniable case. The screen behind me changed again. Gerald had the next document ready, an email chain. The headers were large enough for everyone in the tent to read. From Margot Caldwell to Carl Jennings Notary, Public Carson City, Nevada. The subject line appeared in bold, urgent notarization services. I didn't editorialize. I didn't need to. I just read it aloud, letting Margot's own words condemn her. I need a power of attorney notarized on April 3rd. The signer won't be present. I'm willing to pay $7,000 cash for your discretion. The gasps from the crowd were louder this time. I heard Harrison Cole muttering something sharp to the investor beside him. In the front row, Evelyn Kingsley's expression had shifted from confusion to cold calculation. The look of someone deciding when to cut their losses. The screen advanced. Carl Jennings's reply appeared beneath Margot's email. I read it cash only. My office 2 p.m. More documents flooded the screen. Gerald had organized them perfectly, a timeline of premeditation that was impossible to misinterpret. Credit card statement flight to Las Vegas, April 2nd, the day before my surgery. Rental car agreement, April 2nd through April 4th. Bank withdrawal, $7,000 cash, April 2nd, 10:47 a.m. Hotel confirmation, Carson City, Nevada. April 2nd to 3rd. GPS records from the rental car, time-stamped April 3rd, 1:45 p.m., showing a stop at Carl Jennings's notary office. She flew to Nevada the day before my surgery. I said, my voice calm and measured. She rented a car. She withdrew $7,000 in cash. She drove to a notary's office while I was on an operating table 200 miles away. And she paid a corrupt notary to forge my signature while I was unconscious. Margot made a sound, half sob, half denial. Her mascara was running now, black streaks down her face. She tried to move toward the microphone, but Trevor grabbed her wrist, not to comfort her, to stop her from making it worse. I looked at her. My daughter. And I saw the moment she realized there was no way out, no explanation that would work, no spin that could save her. Dad! She whispered, her voice breaking. I was desperate. You don't understand. I know, I said quietly. I'll get to that. The screen changed again. This time it was a PDF document. The file name was visible at the top, practice_signatures.pdf. The crowd leaned forward. Even from the back rows you could see what it was. 53 attempts to copy my signature. Lined up in rows, each one slightly different from the last, each one a little closer to matching my handwriting. The date stamp at the bottom of the page was unmistakable. March 28th, 2024, 1 week before my surgery. Beside several of the practice signatures were handwritten notes in Margot's distinctive script. Gerald had highlighted them in yellow. Lighter pressure. Slower strokes. Angle too steep fix. The tent had gone completely silent, except for the click and whir of camera shutters. Media crews were capturing everything. I saw phones held up throughout the crowd, recording, documenting, preserving this moment. She practiced my signature 50 times, I said. A week before my surgery. This wasn't a mistake made in a moment of panic. This wasn't desperation causing a single bad decision. This was a plan. Calculated, deliberate, premeditated. Margot was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. I didn't have a choice, she choked out. The Kingsleys, Trevor, I was trapped. I know, I said again. And we'll talk about that. But first, there's someone else who needs to speak. I looked out into the crowd. Patrick Doyle sat in the middle section, his face pale but resolute. When our eyes met, he stood. The crowd parted as he made his way toward the stage. Whispers followed him, people recognizing him from Margot's staff, wondering what this meant. Patrick climbed the stairs slowly. When he reached me, I handed him the microphone. Tell them, I said quietly. Patrick took a breath. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. My name is Patrick Doyle. I was the Chief Financial Officer for Carter Development Corporation, for Riverside Estates. He paused. I helped Margot Caldwell manage the finances for this project, and I'm here to tell you what she did with your money. The screen changed. A spreadsheet appeared meticulously detailed. Patrick continued, "All of you, the investors in this room, you contributed a total of $6 million to build Riverside Estates. $6 million that was supposed to go toward construction permits, materials, labor." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Only $4.2 million ever made it to the project account. The murmuring started immediately. Investors exchanging glances, pulling out their own phones, checking records, doing mental math. $1.8 million was diverted. The screen showed bank transfers highlighted in red. Dates, amounts, account numbers. An undeniable paper trail. Patrick's voice was stronger now. $900,000 went to online gambling sites. $600,000 was transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. $300,000 was spent on personal luxury purchases, cars, jewelry, furniture, all charged to company accounts and disguised with fake invoices. More documents appeared. Casino statements showing massive losses. Wire transfer confirmations to banks in the Caribbean. Receipts for an $80,000 Mercedes. Harrison Cole shot to his feet. "You stole our money." His voice carried across the entire tent. Other investors stood with him. The chaos built like a wave. Voices overlapping, shouting, demanding answers. "We want our money back. This is fraud. I'm calling the district attorney." Margot had collapsed into a chair at the edge of the stage. Her face was in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs. The confident, polished CEO who had stood here 20 minutes ago was gone. Trevor stood 3 feet away from her, not touching her, not comforting her, just standing there with his arms crossed, the look of someone publicly cutting ties, protecting himself before the fallout reached him. In the front row, Evelyn Kingsley was whispering urgently to the family members beside her. I saw her gather her purse, preparing to leave, already distancing the Kingsley name from this disaster. Detective Holland moved closer to the stage. His hand was near his belt, near the handcuffs I knew were waiting there. His eyes were on Margot, but he was waiting for my signal. I raised my hand. The crowd's noise dropped. Within seconds, 400 people had gone quiet again, waiting to see what would come next. Patrick handed the microphone back to me. His part was done. He'd told the truth. I looked out at the faces, at investors who had trusted my daughter with their money, at contractors who had believed this project was real, at Connor in the back row, watching his mother's collapse with tears running down his face, but still standing still, here, still on the side of truth, at Florence beside him, her hand on his shoulder, steady and sure. I turned back to the microphone. "There's one more thing," I said. The crowd held its breath. "So one thing Margot doesn't know. About this land. About where all of you are standing right now." I watched understanding start to dawn on a few faces, investors who were quick with patterns, who were already connecting dots I hadn't yet drawn. About who actually owns it. I pulled a document from Gerald's briefcase. 18 years old. Yellowed at the edges. A property deed. The crowd leaned forward. After everything they'd just witnessed, the forged signatures, the corrupt notary, the embezzled funds, they could sense there was more. Something bigger. Something that would explain why I was doing this here now in front of 400 witnesses. I held the deed up so they could see it. Gerald projected an enlarged copy onto the screen behind me. "This," I said, "is the deed to this property. Riverside Commerce Center. 85 acres. I pointed to the purchase date at the top of the document. On March 15th, 2006, 18 years ago. My finger moved to the buyer's name. Purchased by Prairie Holdings, LLC. I paused. Let them read it. Let them wonder. The screen changed. Gerald showed the ownership chain, each layer appearing one after another. Prairie Holdings, LLC, registered in Wyoming. Owned by Midwest Land Trust. Beneficiary Lawrence Caldwell. The silence that fell over the tent was different this time. Not shock, not outrage, something deeper. The kind of silence that comes when people realize they're witnessing something they'll remember for the rest of their lives. I own this land, I said quietly. I've owned it for 18 years. Margot's face went through stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, then dawning horror as she started to understand what this meant. No, she whispered. The microphone picked it up anyway. That's not possible. We leased it from Prairie Holdings, I finished for her. That's me, Margot. Prairie Holdings is me. It always has been. I watched her try to process it. Watched her mind racing through 3 years of lease payments, 3 years of building permits and construction plans, 3 years of believing she was creating something that belonged to her. The screen changed again. A lease agreement appeared. 3 years old. The signatures at the bottom were impossible to miss. Landlord Prairie Holdings, LLC, signed by Norman Hayes, property manager. Tenant Carter Development Corporation, signed by Margot Caldwell, CEO. The terms were spelled out clearly. Annual rent $120,000. Lease term 3 years. You've been paying me rent for 3 years, I said. $120,000 a year, $360,000 total. Bank records appeared on the screen. Regular quarterly payments from Carter Development to Prairie Holdings. Every one of them on time. Every one of them documented. You built your dream project on land you were leasing from me. And you never knew. I let that sink in. Let the crowd understand the cruel irony of it. Every month you paid rent to the father whose farm you stole. Margot was shaking her head, backing up, looking for somewhere to go, some way to escape what was happening. But there was nowhere. Trevor stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, making no move to help her. Evelyn Kingsley was gathering her purse, preparing to leave, her expression cold, with the calculation of someone cutting their losses. But there's one more thing you need to know about that lease, I said. One clause you probably didn't read carefully when you signed it. Gerald highlighted a specific paragraph. The text appeared large enough for everyone to read. I read it aloud, slowly, making sure every word was heard. If tenant engages in criminal conduct, fraud, or breach of fiduciary duty, landlord may terminate this lease immediately. All improvements, construction, and development items shall become property of landlord without any compensation whatsoever. The silence was absolute now. Even the media crews had gone still, cameras recording, but no one moving, no one breathing. I pointed around us, at the roads that had been graded and paved, at the infrastructure that had been installed, water lines, electrical systems, sewage connections, at the model homes in various stages of completion on the far side of the property. These roads, I said, that infrastructure, those model homes, $8 million you invested. Money from investors who trusted you. Money you embezzled and diverted and stole. I looked at Margot, my daughter. The little girl I'd carried on my shoulders, who'd learned to ride a bike on Brookfield's gravel drive, who'd scattered her mother's ashes under the willow tree. The woman who had forged my signature while I was fighting for my life. By forging my signature and stealing my farm, Margot, you triggered that clause. My voice was steady, not cruel, not vindictive, just stating fact. It's mine now. All of it. You signed it away yourself. Margot's legs gave out. She dropped to her knees on the stage, hands coming up to cover her face. The sound that came out of her was something between a sob and a wail, the sound of someone watching everything they'd built crumble into dust. It was everything you built here, I said quietly. Your legacy, your dream, your proof to the Kingsleys that you were worth something. I paused. It belongs to me, because you built it on stolen land with stolen money. The crowd was still silent. 400 people holding their breath, investors calculating their losses, contractors wondering if they'd be paid, media crews capturing every second of a CEO's complete destruction. Trevor took another step back, shaking his head, his expression carefully neutral. He'd probably already called his lawyer, already planning the divorce filing that would distance him from this disaster before it touched him. In the front row, Evelyn Kingsley stood. She didn't look at Margot, didn't acknowledge her, just gathered the rest of the family and moved toward the exit, the Kingsley name already being scrubbed clean of any association with this failure. In the back row, Connor was crying. I could see him standing there, tears streaming down his face, watching his mother on her knees on that stage. Florence's hand was on his shoulder, keeping him steady, keeping him grounded in the choice he'd made, the choice to stand for truth even when it cost him everything. I looked down at Margot. She was still on her knees, still covering her face, her whole body shaking with sobs. For a moment, just one moment, I felt the urge to comfort her, to help her up, to tell her it would be okay. But it wouldn't be okay, and she needed to face what she'd done. Detective Holland climbed the steps to the stage. His footsteps were the only sound in the entire tent. When he reached Margot, he pulled the handcuffs from his belt. "Margot Caldwell," he said, his voice professional, official. "You're under arrest." They read Margot her rights in front of 400 people. Every word captured on dozens of phones. Every moment streaming live to social media. Detective Holland stood beside her on that stage, professional and calm, doing a job he'd prepared for over 2 weeks. There was no satisfaction in his voice, no triumph, just procedure. "Margot Caldwell," he said, "you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, and wire fraud." He pulled out a card and read from it clearly, making sure everyone could hear. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Margot's mascara-stained face turned to me. Her voice came out raw, desperate. "Dad, please tell them this is a misunderstanding." I stood there on that stage. My daughter, the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares, who'd helped me scatter Eleanor's ashes under the willow tree, crying so hard she could barely stand. The woman who had forged my signature while I was on an operating table fighting for my life. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. I'm your daughter," she screamed. "How can you do this to me?" The words came out quietly. Not angry. Just sad. "I was going to ask you the same thing." Holland brought out the handcuffs, front cuffing the standard for non-violent offenders. Even in her worst moment, she wasn't treated like a violent criminal. Just someone who had committed fraud, who had stolen, who had betrayed the person who loved her most. The click of the cuffs echoed in the silent tent. From the front row, a voice cut through the quiet. Sharp. Vicious. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Evelyn Kingsley stood, her expression twisted with disgust. I always knew she wasn't worthy of this family. She didn't lower her voice, didn't pretend discretion. This was theater, public humiliation, social execution. Farm trash, no breeding, no class. I told you, Trevor, from the very beginning. She turned to the other Kingsleys seated around her. "We're leaving. Now. I will not have our name associated with this criminal." The Kingsley family stood as one. 6 of them. Not one looked at Margot. Not one said goodbye. They simply gathered their things and walked toward the exit, heads high, already distancing themselves from the scandal. Evelyn's voice carried back across the tent. "Trevor, distance yourself from this immediately. Don't let her drag you down with her." Trevor stepped forward, but not toward Margot, toward Detective Holland. He pulled papers from inside his jacket. Crisp, clean, already prepared. "These are divorce papers," he said, his voice businesslike. Not emotional, not conflicted, just transactional. I had absolutely no knowledge of her criminal activities. "My attorney will confirm that I'm a victim here as well." He handed the papers to a uniformed officer standing nearby. Please ensure she receives these." Margot's voice broke. "Trevor, you can't. We've been married 10 years. Trevor finally looked at her. His expression was carefully neutral, the look of someone protecting their assets. The prenuptial agreement was very clear, Margot. Criminal activity voids all your rights. You'll get nothing from me, nothing from my family. He adjusted his jacket. My lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements. Connor will be staying with me, obviously. A federal inmate isn't fit to be a parent. He turned and walked away, down the steps, through the crowd. Not once did he look back. 10 years of marriage dissolved in 90 seconds. A business decision, a calculated cut of losses. Margot watched him go. I saw something break in her eyes, the realization that she'd been alone all along, that Trevor had never been a partner, just another person using her for what she could provide. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching, desperate for anyone who would stand up for her, anyone who would say this was wrong. They landed on Connor. He stood in the back row, Florence beside him, tears streaming down his 16-year-old face. His whole body was shaking. Connor. Margot called out, her voice cracking. Please, tell Grandpa to stop this. I'm your mother. Tell him. Connor stood frozen. His mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Florence's hand tightened on his shoulder. I watched my grandson's face twist with pain, with guilt, with the terrible weight of choosing between truth and the person who'd raised him. He turned away, couldn't watch anymore, buried his face in Florence's shoulder, his thin frame shaking with sobs. Even my own son, Margot whispered. Her legs started to give out again. Holland caught her elbow, steadied her, kept her upright with professional gentleness. Hems, he said quietly, we need to go. He guided her off the stage, down the steps, toward the path that led to the parking lot where the police car waited. The crowd parted as they walked through. 400 people stepping back, creating a clear corridor, not one person moving forward to stop this, to defend her, to say this was too much. The whispers followed her. Stole from her own father, while he was in heart surgery. Forged his signature while he was unconscious. Even her own son couldn't stand by her. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Media crews captured every step. I saw people I recognized, investors, contractors, local politicians, all of them watching, recording, bearing witness to the complete destruction of someone they'd trusted with their money. In the front section, Harrison Cole was already on his phone, probably with his lawyer. 3 other investors clustered around him, their voices rising, angry, demanding to know how they'd get their money back. The Kingsleys were gone. Already in their cars, already calling their PR people, already scrubbing Margot's name from any association with theirs. Trevor was halfway to the parking lot, his phone to his ear, probably already talking to his divorce attorney. And Margot walked through all of it in handcuffs, mascara stained and broken, led by a detective who was just doing his job. I stood on that stage and watched her go. Waited for the satisfaction that was supposed to come with justice. The sense of rightness that should accompany holding someone accountable. It didn't come. Just emptiness. Just the hollow ache of watching your daughter face the consequences of her choices. Connor appeared at my side. His face was red and swollen from crying. Florence stood just behind him, her hand still on his shoulder. Did I do the right thing, Grandpa? His voice was barely a whisper. Please tell me I did the right thing. I put my arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. Yes, I said. You did the right thing. But even as I said it, even as I felt Connor's trembling against my side, I wondered if any of us would ever feel right again. The trial lasted 3 months. I didn't attend a single day. Connor went once. He came home and didn't speak for hours. I'd known the outcome before it started. Gerald had explained it carefully. When the evidence is this overwhelming, forged signatures, embezzled funds, corrupt notaries, everything documented and time-stamped, there's no defense, no argument that holds up in court. Margot's public defender had negotiated a plea deal. 8 years in federal prison. Restitution of $1.2 million to me, $1.8 million to the investors. 5 years of supervised release after she got out. She pleaded guilty in August. The sentencing hearing was in September. Connor had asked if he could go. I'd advised against it. Told him he didn't need to see that, didn't need to carry that memory. He went anyway, 16 years old, and determined to face what his mother had become. When he came home that afternoon, he sat on Brookfield's front porch for 3 hours. Didn't eat dinner, didn't talk, just stared out at the fields. It was 2 days before he finally spoke about it. "She looked small, Grandpa," he said quietly. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the same one Eleanor and I had bought 30 years ago. And old, like she'd aged 10 years in 3 months. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. "Au nom du tis." The judge said what she did was one of the worst violations of trust, that she targeted you during a life-threatening medical procedure. His voice cracked. Mom just stood there and cried. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. 16 years old and carrying weight no child should have to bear. While Connor was processing what he'd witnessed in that courtroom, Gerald was handling the practical aftermath. The financial recovery that would determine whether any of this had been worth it. The court had ordered Margot's assets seized to pay restitution. Gerald walked me through the inventory in early October, sitting in the same kitchen where Connor and I had that conversation. The Mercedes she'd bought with embezzled investor money, $85,000 at auction. The jewelry and watches she'd purchased and disguised as business expenses, $95,000. Her investment accounts, the ones she'd built up while stealing from everyone around her, $340,000. The equity in her luxury condo, the one Trevor had helped her buy before he knew what she really was, $280,000. Total immediate recovery, $800,000. Gerald slid another document across the table. "Trevor Kingsley also made a payment," he said. $150,000. His lawyer called it a goodwill gesture to resolve any potential claims. I'd call it buying his way out of association with this scandal. I didn't care what Trevor called it. It was money that would go toward making investors whole. The title insurance company had processed my claim within 90 days. The deed to Brookfield Farm was returned to me in late August. I'd moved back in September, and Connor had moved in with me a week later. He'd transferred to the local high school, started seeing a therapist twice a week. Some days were better than others. Riverside Commerce Center, the land I'd owned for 18 years, the land Margot had built her dream project on, that became something different. The investors who'd been defrauded needed somewhere to recoup their losses. Gerald had negotiated a settlement. The project would continue under new management, and I'd retain a 40% ownership stake. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about making sure that what Margot had destroyed could be rebuilt into something legitimate. In March, 6 months after the sentencing, Gerald called me with something unusual in his voice. Uncertainty. "Oh, Lawrence," he said, "Margot's public defender just contacted me. He said someone paid off all her remaining debts. The legal fees she couldn't cover, the restitution shortfall that would have followed her out of prison, everything." I didn't say anything. He asked if it was you. "What did you tell him?" "That my client wished to remain anonymous." Gerald paused. "Was it you?" I looked out the kitchen window at the willow tree, where Eleanor's ashes rested. At the fields she'd loved. At the home we'd built together. "She's Connor's mother," I said finally. "And he'll need to make his own decisions about that relationship someday. I won't make it harder by leaving her crushed under debt she can't pay." "You're not going to visit her?" "No." "Call right." "No, Gerald, I'm not. I could help her from a distance. Make sure she had a chance at some kind of life when she got out. But I couldn't have her in my life. Not after what she'd done. Not after she'd forged my signature while I was on an operating table fighting for my life. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive face to face. At Judge Meredith Sawyer's sentencing hearing, the one Connor had insisted on attending, she'd said something that Gerald had recorded and sent to me later. Elder abuse. Judge Sawyer had stated, her voice clear and firm, is one of the most egregious violations of trust that can occur in a family. The defendant did not simply steal from her father. She targeted him during a life-threatening medical procedure, forged his signature while he was unconscious and vulnerable, and sold his property for personal gain. This court finds no mitigating factors sufficient to reduce the recommended sentence. Connor had heard those words, had watched his mother stand there in prison, clothing hands cuffed, while a judge pronounced that she had committed one of the worst violations of family trust the court had seen. He asked me about the debt payment 6 months after the sentencing. We were working in the barn, something we did together most weekends now, fixing things that had fallen into disrepair while I'd been recovering. Did you pay off Mom's debts, Grandpa? I set down the wrench I'd been holding. Your mother made terrible choices, I said carefully. But she's still a person, and you're still her son. Someday, when you're ready, you'll have to decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want with her. What about you? I looked at him. 16 years old. Nearly as tall as me now. Eleanor's eyes, my stubborn jaw. A good kid who'd made the hardest choice of his young life and was still learning to live with it. I've made my decision, I said. I can help her from a distance, but I can't have her in my life anymore. Not after what she did. Connor nodded slowly. He understood. Maybe not fully, he was only 16, but enough. Do you think she'll ever be okay? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I made sure she'll have a chance. 18 months after the groundbreaking, Connor and I stood at Brookfield's fence line repairing a broken post. That's what we do now. We fix things. The work was simple, therapeutic. Connor held the new post steady while I packed dirt around its base. We'd developed a rhythm over the past year, him hammering me, measuring both of us comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes when two people understand each other. He drove the last nail in and stepped back to check his work. Got my acceptance letter yesterday, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. State University, full scholarship. I looked up from packing the dirt. Environmental science, yeah. He smiled, the kind of smile that still surprised me sometimes because it was so much like Eleanor's. I want to work in conservation, protect land, not develop it. I returned the smile. Your grandmother would love that. We gathered our tools and started walking the fence line, checking for other weak spots. The October afternoon was perfect, golden light, cool breeze. The kind of weather that makes you grateful to be outside doing physical work. Connor was quiet for a while. Then, Grandpa, do you think about Mom? The question didn't surprise me. He asked variations of it every few months, each time coming at it from a different angle, trying to understand what he was supposed to feel about the woman who'd raised him and betrayed us both. Every day, I said honestly. Do you hate her? I stopped walking. Set down the toolbox. Looked out at the fields that Eleanor and I had worked for 30 years, that Margot had tried to steal, that were now Connor's future. No, I said finally. I'm disappointed, heartbroken, but I don't hate her. She's still my daughter. That doesn't change no matter what she did. Connor nodded slowly, processing that. Do you think she's learned anything? I hope so, Connor, for her own sake. He picked up a stone and threw it toward the tree line. Will I ever get to see her again? I put my hand on his shoulder. That's your choice. When you're ready. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But someday, if you want, that door can open. Just know, whatever you choose, I support you. She wrote me last month, he said quietly. First letter in a year. We started walking again, heading back toward the farmhouse. Did you read it? Yeah, she apologized. Said the therapy in prison is helping. Said she understands now what she did to you, to us. He kicked at a clump of grass. She asked if I could visit. Do you want to? Not now, maybe in a year. After I'm settled at college. Maybe then. I nodded. That's fair. She asked about you too, if you're okay. What did you tell her? I said you're doing well. Better than okay. That we both are. We reached the farmhouse and stopped on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Eleanor had loved this time of day. She'd stand right here on these same steps and watch the light change across the fields. Do you think Grandma would be proud of us? Connor asked. I pulled out my wallet. Inside was a photo I'd carried for years, Eleanor at 22, standing in front of this same farmhouse on our wedding day. I showed it to Connor. Your grandmother was the strongest person I ever knew, I said. She'd be proud because you made the hard choice. You stood up for what was right even when it cost you everything. What about you? I smiled. She'd say I finally learned how to set boundaries. Only took me 62 years. Connor laughed a real laugh, genuine and free. It was the first time I'd heard him laugh like that in months. We sat down on the porch steps watching the sunset together. People ask me if I regret what I did, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is complicated. I don't regret holding Margot accountable. She needed to face consequences for what she'd done. Forging my signature while I was on an operating table, stealing my farm, embezzling from investors, those weren't mistakes. They were choices. Calculated, deliberate choices. But I regret that it came to that. That she felt so desperate, so trapped, so broken, that she chose to hurt me. That the marriage she'd entered hoping for love had turned into a prison. That the Kingsleys had ground her down until she'd felt worthless without money and status to prove her value. I can't fix her. I've learned that. I can't save her from herself or from the consequences of her choices. But I could save Connor. Give him a home. Show him that love doesn't mean accepting the unacceptable. That you can care about someone and still hold them accountable. That protection and boundaries aren't cruelty, they're kindness. Love means boundaries. Love means accountability. Love means protecting yourself and the people who depend on you. Eleanor understood that. She'd tried to teach me in those final months before she died that enabling Margot wasn't helping her. That protecting her from consequences was teaching her that there were no consequences. Connor is learning it now. Learning that standing up for truth, even when it hurts, is better than protecting lies. And me, I'm learning that it's okay to let go. That you can love someone without having them in your life. That you can hope for their healing without being responsible for it. What are you thinking about? Connor asked, his voice pulling me back to the present. Why, that your grandmother was right, I said. Building things that last isn't about bridges or farms. It's about values, integrity, knowing when to hold on and when to let go. Have you let go of Mom? I thought about that. About the anonymous payments that ensured she wouldn't leave prison drowning in debt. About the nights I lay awake wondering if she was okay. About the daughter I'd loved, and the person she'd become, and the space between those two realities. I've let go of who I thought she was, I said slowly. Who I wanted her to be. But I haven't let go of the hope that someday she'll become who she can be. Is that enough? It has to be. The sun touched the horizon. In a few minutes it would be dark. Tomorrow we'd wake up early and start again. Fix more fences. Tend the land. Continue the work of building something that lasts. You know what the hardest part is, I said. Connor looked at me. It's knowing that justice and love can coexist. That you can hold someone accountable and still care about them. That consequences aren't revenge. I stood up, offering Connor my hand to help him up. Your mother made choices that hurt a lot of people. She's paying for those choices now. But someday when she's served her time, she'll have a chance to build something different. And when that day comes, you'll get to decide what role, if any, you want her to have in your life. What about you? I've made my decision. I can help from a distance, but I can't have her in my life. Not after what she did. Connor nodded. He understood. Maybe not completely, he was only 18, but enough. The sun set over Brookfield Farm. Connor and I sat in silence, watching the darkness settle in. Tomorrow we'd wake up and start again. Fix the fences, tend the land. Build something that lasts. Not just structures, but character, integrity, a life worth living. That's the legacy Eleanor wanted. That's the legacy I'll leave Connor. And someday, if she's willing, maybe that's the legacy Margot will reclaim. But that's her journey. Mine is here, with this boy beside me, with this land beneath my feet, with the lessons learned from loving people who hurt you and choosing yourself anyway. It's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything. As I reflect on everything that happened, I want to share something with you. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're on an operating table to discover who people really are. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any surgeon's scalpel, and I learned that the hard way. These grandpa stories I've been telling you aren't just about revenge or justice. They're lessons I wish someone had taught me decades ago. Family betrayal doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a forged signature. But through it all, I believe God gave us the wisdom to protect ourselves and the strength to hold people accountable, even when those people are our own children. Grandpa stories like mine teach that healing is possible, that you can choose truth over comfort, that consequences aren't cruelty, they're love in its truest form. God walks with you even through the darkest valleys, even when family betrayal shatters everything you thought you knew about the people you raised. Grandpa stories also remind us that we're not alone in these struggles. Many of you have faced similar situations, and I believe God places these challenges in our path to teach us about boundaries, accountability, and the difference between enabling and loving. My advice: set boundaries early, teach accountability. Don't confuse love with accepting the unacceptable. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a comment, sharing your thoughts, hit that subscribe button, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means the world. Thank you for staying with me until the end. A quick note: the stories that follow may contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better. May peace be with you all.